All right, here we go. And we're live. Welcome to Amplify Your Impact. Risk taking risk. How do you stomach it so that you can actually own it all? That's what we're talking about in today's episode. Look, the truth is, as anyone listening in on the show or watching knows, entrepreneurial success opens you up to risks that you may not have anticipated or predicted. But the thing that I find fascinating is the cost of not taking those risks may be the thing that is helping you lose out on the potential success that your business really could have or that you really want altogether. So the question becomes, how do you take risks in an appropriate manner to get the success that you want? This is Amplify Your Impact. It's a show for entrepreneurs who are out to change the world with their purpose-driven businesses while increasing their wealth and balancing their personal health along the way. The warning that we always say at the start of the show is real-life entrepreneurship obviously is raw, and so is this show. So we record it live. It is unedited and unfiltered. So activate your mula bandha and let's go. I'm Josh Biro, as you guys know. Today's guest is someone that you absolutely must know because I have been inspired in the short number of visits and time that we've had together. Her book, which is right here, Own It All, is one of the best modern entrepreneur boutique fitness books I have ever read. And there's a lot of books out there. So, I mean, for what it's worth, I think that it's really something that you want to be checking out. And more than anything else, I have 147,000 questions that I want to ask you, Andrea, because I'm just so inspired by what you're doing. So I'd like to welcome Andrea Isabelle Lucas. She's the founder and CEO of Bar and Soul, which is, if you don't know, a boutique chain of innovative yoga and bar studios. Author of the book, Own It All, as we just said. Also the host of your own podcast, I believe, also called Own It All. Is that correct? Yep. Yeah. Where she talks to badass, inspiring people about how to stop waiting for change and start creating it. So that's probably a lot of the angle where we're going for today. Andrea, thank you so much for coming on the show, Amplify Your Impact. I'm really excited to chat for today, and welcome.
Thank you. Thank you so much for that amazing introduction.
So to kick us off, we always start with our anchor question. It's about impact itself. What is your impact? Or ripple effect. If you had to say, like, I'm on a mission right now in the world to create this impact. I mean, you're doing a lot, but what would you say that is?
I'm glad I didn't try to think too much about exactly how I would answer that in advance, because I think it shifts all the time. I think that if I had to boil it down, it really comes down to, I really want to help as many people as possible feel as empowered as they can to live fully self-expressed. So it comes down to your full potential and having, number one, all the dignity that you deserve to be able to live as fully self-expressed and in your full potential as possible. So that means, so that's really what empowerment means to me, is like removing everything that's in the way of that, both externally and internally. And I'm really, really passionate about that for women. I'm really passionate about, I hate to say anti-oppression, but it is the most all-encompassing term. I only say hate because I'd rather be for something than against it, but I'm pro-empowerment. I
love it. Dignity to live self-expressed is like, there's quote number one for today. I always think about coming out of the yoga world myself, of self-actualization, self-realization, and how much these words get thrown around, but they are a massive simplification of really that bigger purpose. So tell me a little bit more about dignity of self-expression, because I think dignity is such a poignant word and important. Why that word specifically? What's the difference between self-expression and dignity to be self-expressed?
I think dignity goes to the inherent worthiness of all people and the acknowledgement of the sacredness of every single person, that there's no committee of worthiness that says that this person deserves success more than somebody else, or they earned it, or they are more important, or whatever. I think a lot of us are holding ourselves back because we're waiting for that committee to, email us and invite us to, the secret party that's happening somewhere. So I just think that once we have gotten in touch with our own worthiness, and not to say that that's a one and done thing, but once we are feeling worthy of fully expressing ourselves, then we're able to step into really, shining our light and being who we're here to be, and having the impact that we're here to have. And I think that I have to use the word dignity because I think that there's a lot of things culturally that work against a lot of folks, and that there's racism, there is sexism, there's homophobia, transphobia, ageism, a million other things that get in the way, not to mention just, imposter syndrome or childhood trauma, or all the things that could stop us from having our birthright, which is just to be able to show up in the way that sparks joy for us, and to contribute in the way that we feel called to contribute.
Well said. Recently, a friend of Michelle's actually was at our yoga business summit, Johanna, and she did an Enneagram workshop. And it was the idea of getting to know yourself from that specific angle. And I thought it was really fascinating. But what you're triggering for me in all of these external forces that might be working together or working against you, that is, especially on an entrepreneurial journey, it's like the dignity element it's like claiming of something. It's this realizing that is not you, that these other definitions that exist in the world are not who you are, and claiming that for yourself and really owning that, I think, is probably one of the more important, I'm sure that we'll get there, important things to do as an entrepreneur to actually get the success you want. Because I don't know, I'm thinking as you're saying this, I don't know anyone that I look up to as an entrepreneur that hasn't done what you're describing, that hasn't claimed their own dignity and that inherent right, your words, as a human being to get what they want and do something good in the world. Yeah.
And I think one of the aha moments for me around that was a piece of street art that you may have even seen before by an artist named Eddie Kala. And it says, if you want to achieve greatness, stop asking for permission. And it was just a huge light bulb moment for me when I ever read that. At the time, I had a really amazing management role that I thought was going to be my dream job. I had the best mentors. They were awesome. And there was just something in me, this calling to go out on my own, to do something more creative, and I realized when I read that, oh my gosh, my mentors are not going to call me up and be like, Andrea, you've really grown as much as you're going to here. You should go off on your own. I was a great employee. Why would they do that? They weren't going to kick me out of the nest. I had to really empower myself to do that.
Right. I love it. You're making me think of, I watched an interview and you said that destined is a state of mind as opposed to destined as something that just is a result. So, but you can't be destined for anything if you don't have that state of mind to go after it, to actually take that first action. So I want to back us up because there's always so much more here already to unpack. And I'd love to hear a little bit about sort of the origin stories. I think it gives a lot of context to why you're such an empowering person to listen to and to read from and to look at as an entrepreneur. But one thing that you said in your book in the intro that hit me personally extremely hard, because I relate to it directly in a completely different situational way, but I really related to it as well, was you said, no one is coming to save me, not even my family. And so maybe that ties into what you're saying about claiming, and the whole premise of your book of really own it all. That really hit hard for me because I grew up not in an affluent area, not with an affluent family, but I had no real problems. I never didn't get something I needed. I never didn't have a roof over my head. My parents were good parents. I had food, whatever. And it wasn't until later that I had some personal hardships, but they really caught me off guard because my parents had taken care of me so well that when I actually had a problem, I just kind of did think someone else would save me. And so when I read that, totally different context, it hit hard for me just because I remember a moment personally thinking like, oh, no one's going to fucking do this for you. Like any of this, whatever this is in life, you're going to have to do it yourself.
Yes.
And take action.
Yeah. And I mean, that's where I came up with the title Own It All. It is about ownership. It is about entrepreneurship. It is about going after what you want and having it, but it is also about taking radical personal responsibility. You know, that idea of owning something like, okay, that's on me. And you might have had a hardship that wasn't on you, that you had that hardship, and whatever you're going to do next from that place, that is on you. Like how you're going to respond to it is on you. So yeah, it's really about, and I think personal responsibility is a huge wake up call. It's not really that sexy. It doesn't sound, very enticing. Maybe it sounds, even some people right away go to, this sounds like victim blaming, and it really is not about that. And I think that there is a certain place a lot of us reach as we mature where we realize, oh, if I continue to blame my circumstances or other people, I get to be right, but I don't get to have what I want. So maybe it's time to move on from that.
One of the things related to what you're saying that we really talk about a lot in coaching, and even with me coaching coaches and stuff too, is this idea, and we're at such an interesting moment. This is a totally different subject that I'm sure maybe we'll get into today, but we're at such an interesting moment where we're about to go through sort of the death of knowledge itself being power. And it's really, in my opinion, the realization that knowledge isn't power because it's knowledge put into action. So to go back to related to what you're saying, as an entrepreneur, as an individual, as any element of your life, it's not about victim blaming at all, but rather than when you know something is the right path in front of you, or the action to take, at that point, you have to take responsibility for taking that action, because again, no one's gonna do it for you.
Right. It might not be fair that you are starting from wherever you're starting from. And if you don't start from there, you're not going to be able to go anywhere.
Right. Yeah.
So it's just that radical acceptance.
Fairness aside, it's just what it is.
Yes.
So exactly. back us up, because I think a lot of what we're talking around, there's some context that I think lends to your experience and understanding of this in your own unique way. We usually word it like this, like, what's your superhero origin story? Because my first encounter, for everyone meeting Andrea, was in a taxi in New York. And I can't remember why we were sharing the taxi, but probably because it was super expensive. And it's funny because we were both speaking on stage at the event there, and we both have our own businesses. But I always find people's backstories fascinating for how they've got to where they are in sort of this moment of success, because bluntly, you were one of the most articulate, well put together, professional, yet relaxed people I've ever encountered in the boutique fitness world.
Wow.
And it's really exciting, to meet
people
like
go
you
on.
So tell me more about it. It really is very inspiring. So, back us up. How does the current CEO of Bar and Soul, Andrea Isabelle Lucas, and author and mom and all this, like, how did we get here? How did we arrive to this now?
Well, I think that I'll just start with some of the things that I've had to overcome. I did have a difficult childhood. I was a teen runaway. I was a teen mom. So I had a lot of challenges that I've overcome that sounded impressive now when you think about having built a multi-million-dollar business from scratch after overcoming some of those things. But at the same time, I had access to a great education, and I was very fortunate. I was in the public school system, but I had an awesome education growing up. I had parents that really cared about my academic performance and making sure that I went to college. And so even though I had my son at 19 and, my college plans were kind of waylaid, I was never not going to go. I was never not going to be successful. I think there was a lot of pressure put on me growing up that in a way I'm really grateful for, because I always felt like I had big shoes to fill at some point, even though there might have been a lot of things that made growing up really challenging. And there might have been some bad, poor choices along the way, or things that made the journey a lot harder. For me, it was just, I don't know how else to say it other than I was never going to not be successful. So I'm just, and I also think having had my son so early, I had him when I was 19, I had my daughter when I was 26. I ended up graduating with my bachelor's degree when I was 30. And then I just kind of like went balls to the walls, because I felt like I was late to the party, to like starting my career. So I just really went full steam ahead, from that point on.
So I like that, the feeling behind. I still feel behind. I wonder if just you ever get over that. Maybe that's a different personal work thing, but I digress.
I'm working on it actually all the time. Like some days my daughter leaves for school in the morning and like panic just sets in, where I'm like, I have to do everything and I have to do it immediately. And I have only so many hours in the day. And like, what's the most important thing? And I'm really working on like actually using an app to like balance my nervous system and just trusting like, it's okay. It's allowed to be fun. Whatever we get done today will be enough. There's always tomorrow. It would be really weird if I had no to-do list, at all anymore, for save something for tomorrow. So it's a double-edged sword. And I don't know. I don't know if you want me to share more about the origin story, like in terms of like the rock bottom and what you talked about with the.
Well, of course, everything. I'd love to just I think it's so powerful when people are willing to share the realness and the rawness in their story. But maybe we get there by asking this question, because one of the things you just said was, there was this pressure towards you to be successful. And it sounds like in multiple ways. And obviously you had access to that. It makes me think of a quote from a yoga guru from the past, where they said, the biggest problem in human life is no problem, referring to Western culture not taking things that are powerful and can really improve your life situation that seriously until there's a reason to. Right? Like people don't go to a yoga class to fix a back until the doctor fix their back, until their doctor says, if you don't fix your back, we're going to have surgery. People don't overcome the adversity. They have to hit the rock bottom sometimes first, or something really bad has to happen. So maybe your story can relate into that a little bit. But I guess the question is, do you feel like in entrepreneurship, in your experience, is that a necessity of success? Do people have to have some punch in the face, rock bottom-ish, or negative situation to really light that fire for them to have the drive to get to the bigger, better, stronger place?
Well, my brain just forked in 3 different roads, so I have to pick one.
Yeah, sorry, that's probably my fault.
It's so good. I wanted to talk about everything. Okay, so number one, what is success? I mean, is success like falling asleep and waking up and drinking, a glass of water and then going pee? Those are things we just expect to happen anyway, so we don't really call them success, probably, unless you have trouble sleeping or whatever. But so I think in order for something to be defined as success, it has to feel like a challenge or, a quest of some sort to be accomplished, to even have that label of success. And of course, we can all define success differently, and we can define success in ways that are really super fluffy that we don't really believe in, or we can be really honest with ourselves about what we think success is. Because I think sometimes we pay lip service to this idea of redefining success. But I think if you don't really believe that on the inside, what's the point of that? So all of that. And I do think there is something to be said for having a rock bottom. And I've said this a million times. I've never felt sorry for myself that I hit rock bottom. Like, I've always felt nothing but gratitude, because I was in a really unhappy relationship that was just low-key miserable. Like, I was not self-expressed. I was going to school and it wasn't for what I really wanted to be and what I really wanted to do. I wasn't happy in the relationship. I didn't, it just wasn't the life I wanted, but it wasn't that bad. And so I would have stayed in that, and I wouldn't have rocked the boat, and it looked good on paper too. And it felt like what I was supposed to be doing, kind of thing. So I would have stayed at like a 5, out of 10 for God knows how long, could have been decades. And so, yes, that relationship turned violent quite suddenly. And looking back, there were red flags that I didn't realize quite were red flags at the time, I think, but I didn't expect it to become explosively violent. I didn't expect to go running to the neighbor's house, pounding on their door in the middle of the night and having them have to drive me to the emergency room. Like, those were things I didn't see coming. And of course, it's like unfortunate that happened. And I've just never been able to feel any sort of regret about it, because it pushed me to have to take action. It was bad enough that I had to do something about it. And I just couldn't, I couldn't imagine staying after that point. And I was always really grateful for that. And yeah, and that's when I had that no one's coming to save me moment that you mentioned, because, when I called home to tell my parents about it the next day, the response from my father, with such a heavy heart and like actually such deep sadness, his response to me was, "What are you going to do? You can't leave." And I just have nothing but such sadness for him, to think that in his life experience, that was the best he thought he could really hope for his daughter, was, well, yeah, that's bad, but you can't do better than this, so you should probably stay. Like, so sad that was the perspective he ended up with on life, based on the really difficult and challenging life that he had. But again, in that moment, I was like, okay, I got myself into this situation, and like, I'm the one that's, in the emergency room. And even I know how fucked up that statement just was. Like, so it was kind of like, oh God, the grownups aren't coming to fix this. Like, I have to be the grown up now.
I really appreciate sort of the maturity of the perspective of your own father, like, to not cast shade, because I feel like we live in a culture that would love to do that too, like to have some other external blaming. And you've already articulated in a few ways in our conversation how that's not something that if I'm understanding you correctly, like, is empowering for you, right?
Right.
My mother had a really weird saying, and I don't know where it originated, about if you throw a frog into a boiling pot of water, it'll try to jump out. But if you put it in the water and then turn on the heat, it'll swim around until it dies.
Yeah.
And it's like the little small accumulative effect. And she used to tell me about that because her father, my grandfather, married her off at 17 to an abusive relationship. And she had to escape that. And not in the same way that you had, but just, I always remember thinking, and now I have 2 daughters, and I'm just like, I can't imagine that perspective, that like, I'm just have been lucky enough and successful enough. And maybe it's partly because my mom shared that story, and I, have been able to live kind of vicariously through it or whatever, that I don't share that perspective. I couldn't imagine myself at that moment. But that all aside, this idea of, okay, something just like forces you into action. Clearly, to your words, like, there's value in that. So this is a little more specific, practical, entrepreneurial question that I think that you'll understand. And I can't remember if I believe it's one of the either founders or head writers of Vice News has this story about he and his brother being total fuck ups, and how to get things done, like once they finally got into whatever, Harvard or Yale or some fancy university, one of them would lock another one in a room and just say, like, you're not allowed, like literally padlock the room and throw food under the door and be like, you can't come out of this room until you have completed the essay that you have to do. And if you do it in this time, I'll let you out and give you $1,000. And if you don't do it, I get to punch you in the face. So they made these artificial extreme situations of sacrifice and cost versus benefit, but that was their opinion on, like, you have to have that to do something. Like, you have to have some deeper motivation. So I guess practically as an entrepreneur, if you haven't hit a rock bottom and you do have a lot of available stuff to you, how do you still access that motivational place within yourself? So you now, on paper are, again, success is decided by the person, but are very successful. Is it still that same previous historical place that we draw motivation from, or like on the day to day, how do we practically like draw motivation in that same core deep way?
This is such a good question. And that was a great story. And wow, like that's a business model right there. You can hire me to seal you in a room.
Yeah. I would totally hire someone to just be like, I just lock me in the office, and every time I distract, throw something at me. Yeah.
Seaweed strips under the door or something. That's hilarious.
Actually, that's mostly Michelle's job. As my executive assistant.
My job.
Send me a message. I can't punch you in the face.
I'm too far away from you, so I have to.
Yeah. Josh, do this, or I will fly there and punch you in the face. Yeah,
that's funny. And whenever I have something that requires, like, where I just know, like, this is gonna suck and it has to get done, I do use that phrase of, like, I need to seal the chamber. Like, that's it. Like, Friday, I'm sealing the chamber, and like there will be no communication in or out until this thing happens. But so, okay, like, there was a need to be my own breadwinner that definitely lit a fire under me that had me be an entrepreneur from a very early age, like young, really young. Like, by the time I was 18, I worked at a strip club because that was where I could make the most money. And I was entrepreneurial even then. I probably didn't, wouldn't have used those words for it at the time. But I started to hustle really early on because I didn't come from money, and I had a child by the time I was 19. So I really just needed to hustle. And so that's always been very motivating for me in terms of taking risks and putting myself out there. Because frankly, especially, where I live in the Boston area, you can't just work a minimum wage job and support yourself. And, it's just actually not really doable unless you have a community and, like, a strong community, family unit, whatever. So that's one thing. But I think if you're not at rock bottom, which is, by the way, why I wrote my book, was just to be like, hey, I had a huge wake up call and a huge epiphany, and it happened for me because I was at rock bottom, but I'm sharing this in the hopes that maybe it'll give an epiphany for you and not have to go through what I did, but I think my favorite book is The War of Art. And that's what came up when you brought this up, because really, Stephen Pressfield talks throughout that book about how there is something unexpressed in you. And frankly, it is eating you alive. It's making you fucking miserable. And it's going to keep doing that until you express it. And it's something that feels so important to you that you're so afraid to fuck it up that you are not taking the steps, or you're self-sabotaging because you're attaching so much significance to it that you're avoiding it, and you're trying to outrun it, and you're, drinking and shopping and, whatever you're doing to distract yourself. And meanwhile, you need to sit your ass down and do your work, because until you do, that ick feeling is just not going away. So I think that is the real fire under your ass, to recognize that it's like you're already the frog in the water. It's like you're already maybe not aware of how it's reaching this boiling point, but there's something there that is waiting to be addressed and noticed. And I don't know, there was a follow-up thought to that, but I lost it, but it'll come back.
No, I love what you're saying. And, technical term, that ick feeling, but I think everyone can relate to exactly that. Because you're right. It's like, and I've been guilty of this too. I'm sure anyone entrepreneur has at some point. Like, we're like waiting around for something to call us to action. You're waiting around for the rock bottom situation, even if it's not that extreme, but like you're waiting around for that. It almost sounds like, you're making me think like the suggestion is almost like to lean into the negativity and the fear, into the ick feeling, to like lean into like realize that and write it down and like get pissed off about it, because you like need to highlight for yourself, because you can kind of just float in the ick feeling, for a while. And that's when something will eventually catch you, I suppose. So if you don't want to get there.
Yeah, exactly. You could float there for your whole life. And he has one page in that book that's so powerful where he says, no one ever says, I'm never going to write my symphony. They say, I am going to write my symphony. I'm just going to start tomorrow, and that's really powerful. And it's uncomfortable to put yourself out there. Yeah.
I'm totally writing a book right now and it's going so slow.
Rip off the Band-Aid. Just do it, damn it. But I remember actually, I was so comforted. I saw an interview with J-Lo and she was talking about her Super Bowl performance a couple of years ago. That was just like the most epic, amazing, talked about, she just blew everybody's mind. And she talked about how on her way out onto the field, she was like, why did I say I would do this? Like, why did I agree to this? Because she was scared and like the nerves were there and the pressure was so much. And of course, afterwards, she felt like on top of the world and absolutely amazing. So I think, just pushing through that discomfort, the reward is so much greater on the other side. And another thing that came up, this was the thought that swam away that just came back, is that, when I'm going to be on stage, for example, and I'm having, insecurity or nerves or butterflies, a friend of mine taught me a really good trick, which is just to stop making it about me and to just remind myself and tell myself, someone really needs to hear what I have to say. Someone really needs to hear my story. And when I make it about how can I make sure somebody else gets as much as possible out of this, then it's a lot easier to risk, not looking good or somebody disagreeing with you or all the things that we have to risk when we do put ourselves out there.
Well said. I had a couple directions to go, but I think we just pulled it over there. So, I mean, going back to risk and sort of your risk tolerance and taking risks as an entrepreneur, especially for the title of the show, let's use the book as and your story as the example. I mean, was that a hard mental process? Because you really are sharing, deep personal experience and thoughts. And I have done the same a little bit. The book will have elements of that too. But, one thing when I was traveling around with my family in an RV and we had a website, we were traveling as the Nomad Yoga family at the time. We posted some really janky YouTube videos and like had an Instagram page and stuff because we weren't really sure. There was no purpose behind it. It was just like, that's what you were supposed to do if you were traveling in an RV. So, but I couldn't believe how much shit we got, like how much people crapped on what we put out, said negative things about us, about the kids, like just gnarly, weird stuff. But especially as parents, we got interviewed by a couple of larger companies, TV stuff. At one point, we were interviewed to like have a TV series and stuff like that. And because we had lost a daughter prior to going traveling, they would always zoom in on that. And we got so much shit for like sharing that and profiteering off of her death and like that sort of stuff. So I'm just hyper aware of like, that wasn't intentional, but we got to experience on the negative side. When you really are going to share the depth of your story, there is a lot of fear around that. You are putting yourself out there. It's true. Like from my experience, I would say it is true. Someone's going to talk some shit, right? Like, so when we're talking about risk, I suppose you could describe that as risk. When you're telling your story, like, can you go take us back to like prior to writing and publishing the book and stuff? Like, what's the moment where you're like, I'm going to tell this story. I'm going to tell my story, even though there's this risk, and I'm going to have the confidence to just not worry about the outcome because it has enough value. Like, what was the mental process to actually make that decision?
I think that actually, I think it just came about when I was probably doing an end of the year reflection, getting ready, looking ahead to next year. What are my goals? And I realized that writing a book just kept showing up year after year after year. I knew I wanted to be a writer like when I was a kid. Like I never expected to get into fitness. That was kind of an accident, honestly, but I always knew I wanted to write books. So I think even there was a little bit of a weird identity crisis that happened after launching my business. Just to side note, War of Art, like, because I wasn't attached to this vision of myself as this big fitness entrepreneur, I think I was actually much more willing to take action and take risks on that because it wasn't like the real thing, it wasn't like the real whatever goal or something. So I think there was a little bit of an identity crisis involved where I was like, how did I get here? I'm growing this fitness empire. And part of it is my why, which is around women's empowerment, and that part made sense. But it really nagged at me that I hadn't written a book because I always thought I would by now. And as I was looking over my goals and just writing that goal down again, year after year, it was always like a BHAG, you know, I was just like, why am I not doing this? And what would it take to actually do it? And I just asked myself, how did I grow the business? Okay, I got help. Whenever I didn't know how to do something, I hired someone who knew how to do it. And I had them teach me or show me or help me do it. So that's when I ended up deciding to hire a ghostwriter and help me create the book that way. And I like to be really upfront about that because so many people want to write a book and they're like, but how do you do it? I don't understand. And it's like, I had to get help. I don't think I would have gotten started. And frankly, like, I think just the process of outlining it and knowing how to even what the chapters were going to be and what to talk about in each of them, that's the thing I probably needed the most help with. And of course, I mean, it was a very collaborative process, the writing, and I edited and edited. Like, I think after 4 times through start to finish editing and putting everything in, really making sure it was in my own voice. And finally, I just had to be like, okay, good enough, because I could keep changing things forever. But yeah, I think it was that recognition that, wow, I keep saying I'm going to do this and I don't seem to be getting started. So I just pushed myself to do it.
So if I'm understanding what you're saying correctly, it's almost like specifically the book, it was less of, there wasn't like the fear of risk in this instance. It was more like the risk was not doing it. It was like not living up to your own expectation of yourself to like, I'm going to write a book, as you were saying. You already had that decided.
Exactly. And I mean, there was a huge risk in terms of sharing so honestly some of the things about my story because I have kids and because I was going to be sharing some things that I was worried could be embarrassing for them, or if their friends somehow heard about some of it and said it to them and it was like maybe something they didn't know yet. So I waited until my daughter was 12 because she's my youngest, and that I was able to, say, hey, this is coming out. There are some things about my personal life. I don't think you would want to really know them in great detail, but I do want you to know that there are some things in there that you might hear about. And if you want to know the gist of it, like, I can give it to you. Or, and she said, okay, well, can I read it when I'm 14? And I said, sure. And then now she's 16 and she's never read it. She doesn't want to, but at this point we've had conversations about, the riskier things that were in the book. I think honestly, that was the biggest risk to me, was actually just the risk of, is this going to put, my kids or any other person close to me in an uncomfortable position? And then does the benefit outweigh the cost.
Sure. So take us, I mean, I like the cost benefit, and that's such a common thing to look at business or life decisions in general, like the cost benefit analysis, pro con list. And then, there's 1,000 techniques that you can implement around that. But one thing that you said, I can't remember if it's the book or an interview, you were talking about how risk tolerance and confidence increase because you take risks. Like those aren't there. And I really, really like that, because to me, what you're suggesting is risk tolerance and confidence are results, not skills that you develop, right? You don't develop the skill and then become confident. You don't be like, I'm going to develop my confidence and then be confident and then I'll be able to do things. It's like you become confident because you do the things. So
exactly.
If we go back to, like, I guess starting Bar and Soul would be probably somewhere around there too. Like, or you talk about leaving your job, which was like the correct job, air quotations, to be in. How do you, I don't know. Is it one of these things like you just do it? You just take the risk? How do you approach risk in general now or in the past? And for an entrepreneur listening, like, there's a lot of risk in opening a bar studio, maybe not under your brand, but because you've got the system there. But, like if someone's just like going to go all in, go into debt, change their career, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, how do you approach risk, and how do you have that confidence to do that? Is it literally just doing it, or is there something more?
I think we have to start a lot smaller than we think, because some risks are just not tolerable. And if we think we have to start with something huge, often we're not even going to take the first step. So really, as far as and yes, exactly what you were saying, like, I do think confidence and risk taking are like a muscle that, you keep growing and growing the more you do it. I think a lot of people believe that they will arrive at a destination where they're all of a sudden sure that they're going to be successful and they feel really confident, and they don't have any imposter syndrome, and then they'll do the scary thing. And it just really doesn't work that way, because for one thing, there's always a next level of imposter syndrome. So like realizing that that's never going away, and you're going to keep having it as you up level. Every up level comes with imposter syndrome. So if you're waiting for that to be gone, like, you'll be waiting forever. Don't hold your breath. And
there'll be another one behind it.
Yes, exactly. And so I think, and the same goes for risk taking, like, the motto that I created was take the biggest risk you can stomach for today, because there is a risk that you could take today that could catapult you forward. But if you are nowhere near ready to take it, then it's really neither here nor there. You really just have to look at what is the baby step? What is the next action that just can keep moving me 1 inch forward, each and every day? I think that is where momentum builds.
Momentum is such a good way to describe it. I love what you're saying. What is the risk that you can stomach today? And I mean, perfect mantra for entrepreneurship. Because it is, my experience has been in line with what you're describing, that like any business I've built you just kind of do something. And in hindsight, it like wasn't a big deal, even if it felt like a big deal. Like way back in the day, I owned a cleaning company. We would like clean the outside of vinyl houses and stuff like that in the summer. And it was a big deal for me to decide, I already had a piece of crap truck, to go and buy like this expensive hose. I know that sounds ridiculous, but like I was going to have to throw down like $200 for this hose. And that was the big risk. It was like, I'll be out $200 for this hose. What would I do with the hose other than this? But literally that was the step forward I needed to take to build that business. And then I did. So
that was a sacred hose.
That was a sacred hose. Yeah. I think it was even not the right hose. Like I like used it for a week and was like, this is a piece of crap, and went and bought a real hose. But
the sacred wrong hose that
the sacred
actually
wrong hose. Yeah.
actually
yeah.
allowed you to become the person that you were on the other side of having taken that risk.
Yeah, I love that. One step at a time as you go. So I want to talk a little bit more about some of the chapters that you have in the book, because they all just make perfect sense to me. I think they're completely in line with the way what I've experienced. They're making me look at some of my own entrepreneurship in a new way, but also for any entrepreneur, looking for more practical approach. One of the chapters you have is talking about taking ownership of your time. And there's been, a lot of like YouTube and TikTok and Instagram reel conversation in the entrepreneurial world around how time is actually the most valuable resource. And that's why you have to kind of take it seriously. But you have a quote in here. You say, at a very basic level, taking ownership of your time means taking ownership of your life means taking ownership of your time. And I just thought, perfect. Like, what a great way to say how to take ownership of your life. And you do have some drills and everything in the book as well. But talk to me about taking ownership of time, because time is one of those things that it just keeps passing by, whether you take ownership or not. So versus like, if you don't take action on building a house, the house won't get built, but you could always just start at any point in time. But time always is still moving external from your input. So yeah, talking about taking ownership of time, because clearly you said balls to the wall earlier, like you've done that, and that's what's been able to help you grow your empire.
Well, I think you just said it really, really well. And I do think that, like you said, the time is going to pass one way or the other. How will you have spent it? And what is the result of that going to be? There's other things you have to take ownership of if you want to be a successful entrepreneur. And there's different, things that you can leverage. You can certainly leverage your financial assets or whatever. But mostly, I think that if you are bogged down with things that are not moving you towards your goal, then you're going to move very slowly, if at all, toward that goal. And a lot of us are really bogged down. And I have to be honest, on the risk-taking front, this is an aside, I find sometimes it is harder for me to take risks now than when I was starting out. Because when I was starting out, all I had to do was add things to my plate. I had no trouble saying yes to a lot of things. Well, I have probably some trouble, but I did it. But now that there's so much I have more to lose, I find that the only way to add more is to remove something. And I'm finding that so much more challenging. And it's really something that I'm working on and I'm practicing. I wrote about it in the book, but I'm like, it's hitting different now. I'm like, like the stop doing list we talk about in the book. What are the things I'm going to need to stop doing if I'm going to make space for this thing? And sometimes, sometimes it might just be something silly, like, let me stop going to this stupid book club that I don't even like, or let me stop sending Christmas cards because it's just stressing me out. And it's time consuming and I have other things that are taking priority or whatever. Let me stop trying to learn how to cook and just finally order some kind of meal delivery service or whatever that thing might be. I stopped doing my laundry. I send it out and it's life-changing. So those things, the little things are fine. But what if it's like this business that you've built that you have a vision for a different one? And now the only way to make space for that is to actually take this great thing, this really wonderfully beautiful asset that you've built, like that is going to have to come off your plate to do the next thing. So it is challenging to decide what you're not going to do, but I actually think owning your time is about deciding what you're not going to do. And of course, there's ways to own your time by just getting more help, just delegating more, realizing that you don't have to be the one to do everything, even in your household or whatever. So I don't know. I just think at the most fundamental level, the thing that will move the needle the most in terms of owning your life. I mean, your life is a series of days. Every single day, that is the currency of your lifetime. So how you're spending it, that's how you spend your days is how you spend your life. That's a quote from Anne Lamott, I believe. How we spend our days is how we spend our lives, what we do at this moment. And that one is what we are doing. So I just think that what you're doing is the life that you're getting. And the life that you want is going to require you to be really intentional about what you're doing with your time.
Holy shit, I love everything you just said, and I relate to it completely. It's like owning your time is equally, or depending on the phase of your business, from a business perspective that you're in, because I'm in the same place where it's like the way that I have personally worded it has been around sacrifice. It's like if you want Y, you might have to sacrifice X. That's the cost. And or it's like giving up opportunities. So, and it's almost like, the more you build up a business, especially, the more you have to be able to say no to bigger opportunities. So it's like, this might be a $10,000 opportunity, but the opportunity cost of saying yes to it just for that is the bigger vision, $1 million opportunity or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
So saying no is actually taking back control of your time. Do you, on a personal level, and I'm making an assumption here, maybe this isn't the case, but I'm very much like, I get excited. I'm a yes person. Let's do this exciting thing. I see the opportunity in it. Like, that's not a problem for me. So I have to go through a process to come up with a no. Do you have a personal tool, technique, thought process, meditative thing, something that you do to weigh something to be a yes or a no?
Oh, gosh. What a good question. There's a few different things that can be helpful. I mean, doing a time study is huge because it's such a tedious pain in the ass, but like ideally once a quarter, let's say a couple times a year, I will take 2 weeks and just write down what I'm doing every 15 minutes and find out where my time is going. Am I doing tactical things that I actually just need to teach someone else how to do? Am I doing strategic things? And am I fitting in the things that I say are important to me? I have my team do them too. It's a huge pain in the ass. People give me a hard time about it. And then at the other end of it, they're like, wait, I just realized I was wasting all this time. And now, I can gain so much efficiency. So I think that's part of it. I have a natural tendency to be not super decisive. And I'm working on being much more decisive and making decisions more quickly so that I'm not wasting time, because really indecision is a huge time waster. And it's just not something that has come naturally to me. And it's something that it's a muscle that I'm strengthening, because it is, you can really get caught up in non-action when you overanalyze. And I've read the, Harvard Business Review studies and everything about how the most important quality that a CEO can have is decisiveness. Even if you make the wrong choice, it's better to just make it, deal with it, clean it up, move on, learn what you're going to learn. When we're being perfectionistic and trying to make the exactly right and perfect choice, it really does slow us down, and it's really kind of agonizing too. So I probably have more processes than I should for making decisions. I probably need to just flip a coin a little bit more often. What my yoga teacher, who I did my teacher training with, is a big Buddhist, and he used to say, I found that most decisions, pretty much all answers are okay. Like all answers, all options are pretty much okay. It doesn't really matter that much which one that you choose.
Right.
And I try to remind myself.
Yeah.
Yeah, it matters that you choose, right?
I love that. It
What
kind of
about
goes
you?
back.
I need to know. Are you decisive? Like, what's your process?
I oscillate between decisiveness and indecision. I certainly have found myself in both places. So it's probably dependent on what it is. Once I've made a decision, I'm able to just say decisively, like, let's do this. But for me, the most helpful thing, and you've alluded to this as well, actually, is having clarity on destination. Like really knowing in a little bit bigger time horizon, like in 1 year from now? Like, I'd love to say 5-10 years, but honestly, it's bringing it a little closer to home is more powerful for me. So it's like in the next 1 year, like, where do we want to be? What does this look like? That's been really important. And then the second thing is making sure that that goal, let's call it, is limited to like 3 things. I think about it from a yoga perspective of Kriya, like singularity of focus. There's 50 things that I would like to do in the next year, and it's not, but that's unrealistic. So what's the number that like I can remember the 3 things so that I can repeat them to myself so that I can keep going back to them? And if you accomplish them early, great, come up with 3 more. Like, that's never the problem. So whittling it down to like, here's the 3 things. We're going to try to do this in the next year. And I get to say no to anything that doesn't lead to that. It becomes a filter question.
Yes.
And that's where my indecision is sometimes there, because then I'll go to Michelle here and be like, hey, Michelle, what about this? And she gets to be the person who goes, but wait, how does this get us to 1, 2, 3, to these 3 things?
Absolutely. That's awesome. I
So
think
for me,
that's probably, that is the strongest, to have like a beacon, and it's just like, that's where I know I'm going. And if this is going to take me too far off course of that, am I willing to sacrifice that it's going to take me that much longer to get to that destination?
Right. Is the other opportunity presenting itself so much more powerful that you have to do it right now, in which case your goal is that I would suggest that then you have the wrong goal. If something can like take you off course that far.
Totally.
I want to go back to, you mentioned with time, you mentioned delegating, and delegating is such an easy thing to describe, but I think especially entrepreneurs, let's take it more specific to the industries that we're in. Like, if you're in a single location bar studio and you're an owner operator, delegating sounds really good, but like the practical element of delegating tasks off of your plate is something that I see people struggle with. So, I mean, you've grown so many locations, and like in the grand scheme of things, you've moved very quickly. How would you coach someone towards that delegation process, identifying what to delegate or when to delegate it or who to delegate it to? Or
Well, it definitely depends what stage of the journey that they're in. What's their zone of genius? What are they amazing at that really no one else can do it like them? Some things really have to come from the founder. And sometimes it needs to come from the founder for a while you create a system that's teachable and repeatable for other people to be able to start to take that off of your hands. So again, it really just depends on like where in the journey that you are. If you're just starting out, I would say the first person to get on your team is your number 1 fan, your biggest true believer, whoever that client who comes to every single class, or just that friend who volunteers to come to your event and like take pictures for your social media, or whoever. I had an intern. The first person that ever helped me out was an unpaid intern who was just like, someone who was a true believer, and she was in college, and she was like, can I just put down that I was your media director on my resume? I was like, yes, go crazy. And she's like, great. So I'll just do this for free then for now. And I'm like, amazing. So, that was where I started. And then it was like my top student who came to every single class became my first trainee who started teaching my method. And she was my first admin. So, again, it just depends where you are in the journey. I think sometimes we believe that things that we know how to do can't be taught. And I really think I would encourage you to try to develop a system so that it can be taught as much as possible. And every time you look at your to-do list, just ask yourself, am I like the one and only person that can do this, or could someone else do this just fine? And then, there's just so many things that go into this. I could go on and on, like making sure the people on your team are really the right people that are right for that role and right for your business, so that you don't feel like you have to review everything 100 times. And, like right now, the person who's doing the social media for the studios is just so awesome. And I was just telling her the other day, I'm like, yoga, bar inside. I mean, she's an expert. She's really passionate about social justice issues. So I don't worry. I mean, nobody's going to say the right thing all the time, and we still mess up, I'm sure, but I don't worry that there's going to be like a huge foot and mouth situation, because I know how sensitive she is when she's creating this copy. And I know that if something's like really touchy, she'll send it to me and be like, how does this sound? And, whatever. But overall, I do not need to review anything before she puts it out there, because she's right for that role and she's a culture fit, and it's a great fit. So that's huge. And then I would just say the last thing is I have a virtual assistant full time now. And again, he's like such a right fit. And the fact of him being 40 hours a week, I know in the beginning, you probably cannot afford to hire somebody 40 hours a week, but having someone 40 hours a week that typically when you're working, they are at their desk and you can just be like, hey, I just got this brilliant idea, but like, we have to send it out by noontime today, or like whatever. And knowing that he's right there and he's like, I'm on it, and he's just going to do it. Like, that has been so life-changing. I mean, this is only since he has been with us since April of this year. And like, my world has completely changed. It's been so awesome.
Yeah. So to recap a little bit, I'm hearing you say, you have to have the systems. You have to systemize what it is that you do. Mm-hmm. Critically look at what you're doing and like, is it only me? But then also you have to really trust the people, like obviously right person in the right seat, but you have to give them that autonomy and that trust. And initially, to really be able to do it. Yeah,
exactly. And initially you're not going to have a lot of money to invest. And that's why I say hire the people that are just like obsessed with your brand and so excited about your vision, because you're going to be able to trust them, because like they love you and they might mess up by accident, but they're not going to mess up just because they didn't give a shit,
Yeah.
But what about you? I want to know your delegation wisdom.
Oh, I guess sort of the same thing. I think that I always look at delegating as, we call it building the machine, right? So if I am not my business, because I think that's, to me, part of the definition of entrepreneurship. Is small business ownership is you start a business that you work in, you've kind of purchased yourself a job. Mm-hmm. So you and your business are slightly synonymous. That's not a bad thing. It's just, is that your intention? As soon as you become an entrepreneur, I think you're stepping outside of that and saying, no, the business is a separate entity from myself. Therefore, just like your kids or whatever else, like they have to be autonomous and they have to be self-sufficient. Your business has to be sufficient on its own. So from that viewpoint, you're building it as the machine, which means anything that I do that's repeatable, if it doesn't have to be me, then there would have to be a system in place so that someone else could take it. Yeah. Or to your point, and that's, I think, a really valid point, or you have to be willing to spend the effort of hiring and the financial input to hire the person who is just so much better than you at that specific thing. Mm-hmm. That you don't need to develop the full system because they're going to do that as part of it anyways. But that's certainly at a certain level of business that is not when you're starting out. So,
and I don't know about you, but I find I don't know if I can think of an exception to this. I am so stressed out by being the best at whatever the thing is in my business. Like when I'm the most social media savvy person on my team, we have a problem because I am not the expert that we need for social media, and even if I'm the biggest expert on bar or yoga on the team, well, that's a lot of pressure on me to feel like I should really be doing all these things, and the list could go on and on. So the more you can hire people that are even better than you at that thing, that is the dream.
Yeah. What you're making me think of too is part of entrepreneurship that was a big epiphany for me some years back. Was your entrepreneurial journey forces you to perpetually acquire more skills and knowledge, but not because you're going to do the things. It's because you need to have enough understanding to be able to hire someone else who can do it. Like if you want to hire me to do Facebook ads for you, which I don't do, I'm just using it as an example, but like, if you want to hire someone to do Facebook ads, you don't have to be an expert at Facebook ads to hire an expert. You just have to know enough to be able to identify the fact that they're an expert.
Right.
So, you know, you don't have to be the best, but there's a certain bar of understanding. So,
Totally.
I love it. I mean, where delegation and like the entrepreneurial nerd brain kicks in is just with your different locations and stuff. One of the things that you've clearly been able to do is translate your product to be an actual productized unit so that it can be distributed across more spaces. So I want to take us over to the bar side of things, and maybe there's a little personal health conversation in there too, because, you know, as an entrepreneur, you need to take care of your personal health. I'm assuming bar and yoga were somewhat where that's how you started to do that. I mean, I guess simplistically, like, why bar? Why, of all the options, why that one?
Yeah, that's such a good question. And I think that when a lot of people share their story about how they found yoga and it spoke to them on such a deeper level than just physical movement, that was really my experience with bar. I never really worked out before I did bar. Like, I didn't do sports in high school. And it just felt right. Like, it resonated with me. I took my first class and I was like, wait, I loved that. I want to do that again. And I never really felt that way about a workout before. And I loved how challenging it was. And yet, like, in a way that didn't make me dread going, like in a way that made me look forward to and excited to go. Bar is very low impact. It's easy on your joints. It can feel really graceful. There's stretching, which can feel really nice. And yet it challenges you. And it challenges you in a way that you can push yourself to whatever your edge is that day. And I've literally had NBA players, like, you know, professional hockey players in my class, the same class with maybe a businesswoman who's in her 70s and some college girls or something. And everyone is kind of getting their ass handed to them in the best way possible. And feeling so challenged and feeling so good, but also doing it safely in a way that is low impact, easy on your joints. You're not likely to injure yourself. And that is a sustainable method that you can do for years and years. So those are a lot of the things I love about bar. I think it showed up for me at a really important time in my life. And when I was going through hell, it was my escape. And I would walk into a class obsessing over what was I going to do, and, you know, just totally stressed about everything. And when I would be in class, I couldn't think about it at all. And then when I left, everything just seemed not as bad as, you know, it had been. And then the amazing side effect was my body started to transform, which was just so almost like a surprise. It was like, whoa, wait a minute. Like, I forgot that was part of why people work out. And so, I don't know, it just really helped me feel like I had the power to transform myself and my life.
I love that, the hidden result of like, oh, I'm in great shape. Amazing. Oops.
Wait, like, I have abs. What?
Wait, how did that happen? Yeah.
Right.
That's the best. The accidental ab situation is always really good. Yeah. I resonate with what you're saying, because I think yoga, that is a common yoga story. You know, a lot of yoga teachers would share that. I had a story somewhat like that as well, where it's like, I wasn't really going because I was like, this is going to get me in great shape. But, you know, like, that's not the primary purpose. That is one of the results that you get. But so then you discover this thing, it resonates with you. One thing you said that's so important, and I wanted to maybe ask about this, is from a practitioner, consumer of boutique fitness standpoint. I think the conversation is starting, but there's been so much conversation in the industry around what you kind of like should do, or what the unique specific outcome benefit of this modality versus that modality is. But the missing element in the conversation is like, is it fun? Like, do I like to do this? Do I want to come back? Because clearly coming back and doing more than one bar class is the most important factor when you start anyways.
Exactly.
You know, what you do in the class is whatever, but you have to do it a few times. How with Bar and Soul and with like what you've developed, how has that been something you guys have considered or like built into the programming?
It's so funny because you just reminded me, there was a stint where I decided to try CrossFit and I went to several classes and I enjoyed them and I felt really great when I would leave. And I just felt great the rest of the day. And I was like proud of myself and like patting myself on the back. And what started to happen is in the morning, I would be like, oh yeah, I'm going to drop off the kids for school and then go to CrossFit. And then like, I don't know, my car would just like drive to the grocery store instead and be like, actually, I got to go grocery shopping. It's an emergency. So like, I just couldn't get myself to stick with it for whatever reason. There was enough resistance to it that it just wasn't a sustainable habit for me at that time. So, you know, what we know about behavior science and habit science is that we have a really hard time staying motivated by our shoulds. It just fizzles out pretty fast. So if you're doing something because you know you should, yeah, no, it's just not going to last very long. Willpower is going to have to be so strong for you to keep up with that thing. So whenever someone says to me, what is the best workout, do you think? I'm like, whatever one you can stand, whichever one you actually like and find yourself looking forward to at least a little bit, because, and that's why, I mean, I'll get to the other part of your question in a second, but yeah, we can only sustain ourselves on shoulds for so long. That's why I think so many New Year's resolutions just don't work, because we're not thinking about the reality of behavior science. And we really are not going to be able to force ourselves to do anything for too long. We need a better why than I know I should, or I want to look good, I need to lose weight. Those are actually very amotivating factors. So what I find actually motivates me to go to class, and what we really use a lot in our marketing is the soul piece, right? Not just the fitness piece. To be honest, to a fault, I think we downplay the physical results because we're trying to be ultra sensitive and feminist and not triggering anyone or body shaming or, you know, implying that anyone should look a certain way. So I think like we skirt around that probably to a fault, where we really could talk about the physical benefits a little bit more. And we tend to just like sidestep that, instead talk about the community and the other non-tangible results that people get, because they are those other je ne sais quoi elements that make it something that you can look forward to. And if you can look forward to it, you can stick with it. And if you can stick with it, you're going to get those physical benefits. So we focus on things like community, like self-care, like taking sacred time for yourself and really getting in touch with yourself and honoring your well-being and your peace of mind, and taking a break from all that you do so that you can have the ripple effect. Because that's another thing too. I mean, I just think of our clients as these world-changing badasses that, you know, what we're trying to do is support them and having the ripple effect that they're here to have.
I love it. One of the things that you're making me think of is the same question, but on the entrepreneurial side too, right? Like to just do things in your business because you're like, I should do this in my business. Like that sucks. No one offered, like, there's a moment where you got to just grind some stuff out, of course, but like some deeper purposeful motivation. You mentioned earlier, Andrea, that like, you're kind of I'm paraphrasing, obviously, like you're like an accidental boutique fitness owner. Like that wasn't like, one day I'm going to open a bunch of bar studios. Like that wasn't. So for other entrepreneurs looking at opening business or building up their business, does the modality actually matter? Because I mean, if you said for a minute you were, you know, liking CrossFit, like, would you be at the same place if you open up 10 CrossFit places? You know, it was CrossFit and Soul, or like, could it have been yoga and Soul? Like, is there, you know what I'm saying? Like, is the product that thing that matters for your success?
Such a good question. So good. And I mean, I've been doing bar since 2006. I've done a lot of other fitness methods along the way. Nothing that I fell so in love with that I was like, that's it, we have to change what we're doing and we need to become a rowing studio or whatever. Although I do think as an entrepreneur, if you're dead bored with your product, like you got to find a way to not be, because it's just not sustainable to, like you said, there's things you got to just grind it out in your business because it has to get done. But I think that there needs to be some passion there for it to be sustainable. And for me, I have to say, like, yeah, the bar and the yoga are not what I'm passionate about. That's not what I would consider my passion. I consider my passion to be empowerment and helping people feel empowered to change their lives and to fully live into their fullest potential. And so that's what gets my feet on the floor in the morning. That's my why. That as long as I can keep returning to that and stay connected to that, I don't want to say it could have been a nail salon, but honestly, I think so. I actually do. I think that we all have our why. You could have that cleaning company, and there's a bigger why for why you're doing it. And maybe it's to be a breadwinner for your family, or maybe it's because hospitality just lights up your heart or whatever. But I think you have to have a why, but I don't think it necessarily has to be specific to the modality or the product, as long as you can stay connected to it. Because I have to say, like, through the pandemic, when I wasn't interacting with clients and I was just behind my computer screen solving and resolving problems like every freaking day, I really hated my job a lot of days, like pretty deeply. So it feels really good to be on the other side of that now.
Yeah, it makes sense. I mean, I think in the yoga world, my experience throughout the years has been yoga has I don't even know how to describe it. Like, people with very strong opinions in the yoga world. Like, it should be this way, or it's like, I'm from this lineage versus you're from that lineage. This is correct. That's wrong. Like, it's very like rigid, actually, which is ironic, being that it's about flexibility in some way. But that in itself, if that's the reason from the business side, like, I'm going to do this way because it's the way that it's always been done in yoga, like I haven't seen that be the successful motivator. There has to be like a deeper entrepreneurial purpose. That's just what you do. That's just the thing, it's just the product, but there has to be something deeper than just that for it to really deeper belief almost.
So are you saying that with your yoga entrepreneur coaching clients, most of them, it's not the yoga part that they're passionate about, it's the why behind their, like, do they each have their own unique why that is really what drives them? Or are you saying something different?
No, what you're making me think of, to better articulate this, there's two cases. So there are the people who it is the yoga and it's their passion around that. And yoga comes like as a little bit of a precursor to our current state of boutique fitness. So what I see having had happened is there's a lot of really great yogis who are excellent yoga teachers who want to philosophize about yoga, maybe teach some yoga or whatever else, but they don't actually like the business element of it at all. They don't like the entrepreneurship, but they have found themselves there because that was the only path in our culture for you to make it a full-time thing. If we go back to like yogis in India, historically in the Brahmin caste, that's the richest caste that there is. So yeah, you did yoga every day because you didn't have to do anything else. You weren't worried about anything else. So whereas we have to create the business element to cover, the expense of operation. But then there's the other person that it's like, whether it's vinyasa yoga or hot yoga or yin yoga, like, or bar, like, that doesn't matter nearly as much as I like this and I understand it, but the business, entrepreneurial, sharing it, improving the world impact level, like, that's actually the deeper motivation. They seem to be the ones that have an easier time finding really great entrepreneurial success.
get it. That makes a lot of sense. And I think that there is space. I think that there's space for entrepreneurs to decide that for themselves. And
Sure.
I think a lot of us get a little in our heads about that. And we worry that maybe I actually had a coaching client very recently who hasn't opened her studio yet. And she was like, so I don't teach. Like, I have managed a yoga studio. I'm passionate about it. I'll do one-on-ones, but I don't teach group classes. And there was like that insecurity was already coming up of like, am I an imposter to open a studio if I don't teach classes? And I will say that I am much more excited about entrepreneurship and business ownership than I am about fitness of any sort. And, I was finishing up my degree, which took some twists and turns. As you know, I didn't get my bachelor's until I was 30. So by that point, it was a degree in women's studies. And I was so passionate about feminist issues by that point in my life after everything I'd experienced. So I actually thought I wanted to go and get a PhD and be a college professor because I wanted to write books and I wanted to like be part of the conversation and like, be advancing the discourse and inspiring and, I don't want to say empowering, but helping folks to empower themselves and what have you. And I actually just had an epiphany because bar was a complete side hustle I was doing part-time. And I just had an epiphany one day where I was like, well, actually, this could be a great platform for all of this cultural impact that I want to create. Like, you can create a culture in a business, and especially a business like this where people are coming to you multiple times a week. Like, you can create this like water that we're all swimming in that is, super empowering. And that's what ended up spurring me on to starting Bar and Soul. So, there's people who love to teach, and I think awesome. Like, if what you love the most is teaching, just like have amazing people on your team or have a business partner or someone who likes doing all the other stuff. But I do think it's so important to just be honest with yourself about what's the part that lights you up the most. Because again, it just goes back to that sustainability piece that we were talking about, like having to force yourself to slog through anything is not very sustainable for long.
Right. It just goes back to, what is your actual passion and that honesty with yourself, that self-expression, like who are you and what are you really the best at, and auditing on that level and sticking to that.
And being honest with yourself when it starts to shift too, because that does happen.
It totally does change for sure. Yeah. That's one thing that I could say I've personally been surprised in, especially the primary business I'm working within right now, like the Yogapreneur Collective, like where I was excited in the beginning versus a couple of years back versus now, like they're quite different places. And the reasoning at its core level has stayed the same, but like on a more personal level has shifted over that time too. So just being able to audit and be introspective about that and own that, I think, is really powerful. Okay, so I have to ask about the chapter in the book, Own Your Style.
Okay.
Because I think you have great style the few times that we've been around each other. I personally do not relate to this style part of it. Like the clothes that make you feel like a boss element, because I mean, I do get it. I get that like when you're dressed in a certain way, it builds a confidence feeling in the environment that you're in. Yeah. But I feel like in my life personally, I've more just like accidentally found myself underdressed than ever being like, oh, I'm overdressed. Like it's never gone that way.
Okay.
And it makes me think like, I don't think I have a style except the hat. I always wear flat brim hat. That wasn't even on purpose. I just started doing it, and now it's like become a kind of a
your
joke.
Brand at this point.
It's my brand now.
For sure.
So other than hat style, like from an entrepreneur or just personal level, I thought that was really fascinating that you put that in there, this own your style part. Can you elaborate on why this, like why even define your personal style? What does that do for you? How is that? So why is that? It gets its own chapter. Like why is it such an empowering thing for someone?
Okay. Well, let me ask you, how many tattoos do you have?
Oh God. Okay. Like too many to count now, honestly.
And like, why? Like, why? I'm sure it was like uncomfortable and expensive and permanent. So like, what was your why behind, I mean, without, sharing anything you don't want to, but just I'm
Oh
curious.
no, I'm happy to share. It's a good question. I wouldn't have thought about it this way. It's changed. I mean, why individual tattoos? Like now at this point, I really appreciate tattoo as an art form.
Mhm.
So like even the more recent tattoos I've gotten have been from the perspective of like the beauty of the art and how it plays off of my body as the canvas. And like, I actually like that part of it. But my first tattoo, I'll tell you my tattoo story because now we have to. My
Yay.
first tattoo is on my ankle. And I got it because I was 15 and I went to a piercing parlor, piercing and tattoo place, and I wanted to get my tongue pierced.
Okay.
But because I was 15, I was not allowed without parental consent. So we phoned up. This is back in the day of like dial up. We phoned up my mom and the lady, and she says, hello. And I'm like, hey, mom, I'm at the piercing shop and I'm going to get my tongue pierced, but you have to tell them that I'm allowed to do it. And she lost it on me.
Oh.
You're not getting your fucking tongue pierced. You're not allowed to have metal in your body. If you come home with your tongue pierced, like, I'm going to rip it out of your mouth, the whole thing. And I said, fine, I'm getting a tattoo then. She goes, I don't care, get a tattoo, but don't come home with the tongue piercing. She hung up the phone. And I think she didn't realize what she said. So then I got a tattoo. And so at that moment, it was the most badass thing I could do.
Oh my God.
She was not happy. But anyways, it was the feeling of a tattoo being like masculine hardcore. That was,
Ooh, there you
there
go.
was something there originally. Yeah.
Yeah. So that was a self-expression. That was an expression of your style at the time. And it was, communicating something about how you wanted to be seen and how you wanted to see yourself. But I have to know, like, did you just go over to the wall and start flipping it to like just find something at random?
Totally. Here, let me see if I can get, I know that some of you guys are listening and not seeing this. It's this tattoo.
Love.
So it's like, I'm an Aries. So there's an Aries ram. I liked the shape of the sun. So I was like, cool, let's put a sun on it. And then the tattoo artist, this dude's like, you know what we should add on? A devil's tail. And I was like, yeah.
You're like,
let's
obviously.
add a devil's tail. Obviously, we should have a devil's tail. And now I look at this and I love it because of the story, but I'm like, what the fuck was I thinking of the devil's tail on a sun? Like, people are like, what does it mean? I'm like, I don't know, dude. No idea.
I love it. That's so awesome. And I love that that you were going for like a masculine bro look at the time. It was just whatever. Maybe I made up bro, but like you felt it looked kind of badass or kind of hardcore. And so I think that it is important that the way we look reflects the way we want to be seen. And I think that as far as mindset goes, like I said earlier, you can redefine success as like having 5 people in the world that love you. Like you can make up a lot of things that you say success means, but what you really believe about success is what you're actually going to strive toward or feel or measure yourself against, I guess I should say. So I think when it comes to mindset, our self-image plays really huge in which risks we will take, where we will put ourselves out there and where we won't. And I think that creating yourself in whatever image that expresses how you want to be seen is so, so empowering. I'm sure it's not an accident that I'm obsessed with RuPaul's Drag Race. RuPaul is like my idol. Like David Bowie was so self-expressed and creative and edgy, and you couldn't ignore David Bowie. You can't ignore RuPaul. You can't. And you look at these drag queens that I'm obsessed with and what they start out as and what they transform themselves into. I mean, they are creating themselves through such a process of just invention, just creating, like every day is a blank slate. Like today I'm Cher, you know what I mean? Or like today I'm going to be this like alien, space hottie or whatever. Like they're so creative and interesting. And I just think if we could all be a little more unafraid to express ourselves visually and through our style, we would be able to break through break down doors, really, and break through internal barriers as well as external barriers, because a lot of people might not take you very seriously if you look kind of frumpy, or like you don't respect yourself that much in how you're dressing. Or if you, let's face it, like you could dress really boring. You could just look boring. And maybe that works perfectly if you're someone who just really doesn't want to get a lot of attention, or if for whatever reason you're already getting the recognition that you need and that you're looking for. Or you can dress really interesting and make yourself stand out and make people ask questions about you. Or you can dress like someone who's really brave and people will be like, wow, they're kind of a badass, you know? So I just think how we dress sends a message to ourselves about who we are. And I think that if you don't think that's true, one thing to think about is imagine yourself in like 10 years when you've like arrived at whatever success is, you know? And imagine like a day in the life. And if you try to think about what you're wearing and how you look and how you show up at the different like little vignettes, probably there's something elevated, or it's a best version of yourself, put it that way. And I think the faster that you can identify that, if you're like, oh, wow, the best version of me wears like really funky sunglasses and like has this awesome, like expensive luggage, you know, they're sailing through the airport with like their cool luggage or whatever. What the hell? Maybe it's time to get the luggage and just start being that person now. Totally. And be able to like take yourself seriously as that future version of yourself.
I like that. I also relate to the luggage because I recently just bought a new piece of luggage that I paid way too much money for. But it makes me so happy to walk through the airport with that piece of luggage.
Seriously.
So I wouldn't have thought about that as a stuff, but it is part of that. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. It really is. And it goes to how you see yourself and what kind of standards that you set for yourself, or what kind of results that you expect. And I think it has a ripple effect to what you're going to be willing to go for and to risk.
Yeah. So then, keeping us going on the subject of the book, but changing gears slightly, because this outward projection of yourself and what it breeds, you know, what it speaks to yourself, but then how other people relate with you, I think is such a powerful thing. It makes me think then about relationships, and you talk about Don Miguel Ruiz and his book, The 4 Agreements.
Yes. And,
you know, you add that into here as well. So tell me about, you know, why that specifically. Like what I found fascinating is The 4 Agreements is excellent, but it's again, and it's a little bit of a tangent because we mentioned earlier doing this workshop with Enneagram. I had asked Johanna this question too, that like there's Enneagram and then there's like the Colby test. And then there's all these different things. Why pick one over the other, you know? Mm-hmm. And so same sort of question. Why the 4 agreements? Why? And for those of you who haven't heard, I've got them here ready. Like be impeccable with your word. Don't take anything personally. Don't make assumptions. Always do your best. Like it's very simple that anyone would relate to, but how did we arrive at the 4 agreements in the book, and why those ones for you?
Thank you. Good question. I guess there is really something powerful about the simplicity of that philosophy. And I have to say, probably the 4th one, always do your best. I don't resonate with that one as much. Like it just like, that one's just like, okay. But like the first 3, I feel really strongly about. And I think that actually number 3 is pretty closely tied to number 2. So the first 2, be impeccable with your word, like be honest. Your words are creating your reality. Your words are, first of all, the things we say out loud, people are going to mirror back to you. So if you say, there's never enough time, people are going to be like, I know. Or if you're like, you know what, I don't need to rush. Like I have plenty of time. People will be like, yeah, you know, they just agree with you. And so it's like, I think we have to be careful what we're saying, because we're creating our reality and we're getting all this external validation to however things seem to us in our heads. In general, I think the book for me is about how things seem to us in our heads is the life that we're getting. And it's the reality that we are living in. So the words you're saying, you say them out loud, you say them in your head, people around you start saying them. That is creating a perception or a lens through which now life is occurring to you. So that's really powerful. And then I think don't take anything personally is just huge. And it's one of the biggest life lessons I ever learned. I don't think I got it even a little bit until I was maybe like 32. Like I was familiar, I had read the book by then, but I didn't actually get that until later because it's so, and then I still have to get it, all the time. I have to keep getting it. And I still do it, but it is just one of the most profound and helpful philosophies that I've ever encountered. And that has just served me so, so well, just to remember that it's really not about you. And we make up these stories in our heads and then we suffer because we have this whole, perception of reality that we've made up that doesn't serve us and doesn't even feel good. And we create this whole world of suffering about it. And just allowing other people's shit to be theirs and not taking that on and making it mean anything about us, I think is so, so huge. And
will endlessly present itself in front of you in entrepreneurship. Like no one can avoid this one. People are going to come at you with some shit, even not even directly, but just like, yeah, I think I agree with what you're saying. And that the assumptions don't take it personally part, I think is also very much, they could be consolidated almost, but yeah, I guess where is there a line? What I'm thinking about is like, and you'll have had, I'm assuming, a lot of experience with this just in growing your business. Is there a line in the don't take it personally concept where someone's dealing with their own shit and you have to not take it personally or take it on because it's not something you need to do, but their shit that you're seeing is also a problem for you? Like, where is there a line there where you have to be like, I'm not going to take this personally, but also like, this is, I have to deal with this in some way. I have to sort it in some way from a business perspective.
Absolutely. I almost think the two, I almost want to say have nothing to do with each other. Like there's also where I thought you were going to go is sometimes there's actually valuable feedback for us that we just really need to receive and be like, oh, got it. Okay. This reaction that you're having, maybe to something that I did, there is actually something for me to look at here. And that's what makes it so hard because that's where sometimes I think own it all becomes like to a fault for me. Like I try to own it all too much, where I immediately look within and I'm like, oh, what could I have done differently? And how did I contribute to the situation and stuff? And, and then after a little bit of processing is like, okay, no, I feel I'm in my integrity here and it just isn't, landing with this person and that's okay. And I'm going to have to let this go. It's not necessarily easy to do, but I think, okay, let's think of an example of this. Like, yes, I'm not taking it personally, but also this doesn't work for the business. I would say, like, what's a scenario that you have in mind for that?
Well, actually, your re-articulation of what I'm suggesting is more in line with where my head is at. It's kind of like a good example that I could think of that is kind of common in coaching that I experience, and even in my own businesses. It's like a communication style. Okay. It's when you have someone who, especially if there's drastic cultural difference within the same organization, where someone comes from a very direct communication style versus a very indirect communication style, even the specific words used, like that in itself, there's the element of like, well, don't take it personally when Andrea says to me XYZ, but at the same time, the way it's delivered triggers me every single time. Like, where's the line where we need to address the way that this communication is happening? Or is it just my shit? Or is it just don't take it personally? Or is it like, judgmental to tell someone to communicate differently than they do authentically? That's kind of where my thought is going with this.
Ooh, okay. So I think there's so many different, nuances to the situation, but I think it is okay to say, I think it's okay to have a communication policy and just to say, hey, this is how we communicate here. I've noticed a few times you're communicating in this way. I love that you're very self-expressed. I am requesting that you communicate more in this way. It's just more in line with our culture here around communication. Or, I mean, we have a pretty thorough communication policy that's like, please don't reply all when you should just be replying to one. And, like if I have an announcement that I want to make to the team, I send it to the studio managers so that they've gotten the communication first. They've asked me questions. They're fully briefed on the situation, and then they disseminate it. I don't just send out an e-blast to the whole team. Out of respect for the studio manager, they need to understand and raise their hand and be like, wait, I have questions or whatever first. So, my communications flow through them to the team. So things like that. So I think it's perfectly reasonable to have policies in place that outline how you would want something like that to go.
Right. So the don't take it personal part, it's like almost, this is an extension of the don't take it personal.
Yeah.
Like, solve for this ahead of time by having clarity on how you're going to operate around these sorts of situations, or when you encounter one, then that's where the questioning goes, rather than the two people talking about the individual conflict. I like that a lot.
I mean, chances are if it's like rubbing you the wrong way, it's happening for other people on the team or for clients. So I think like it's probably worth addressing in a situation like that. I also think that whether something works for you or not doesn't make it necessarily wrong for the other person, but like if it's not right for you, like it's your business. So I think you as the entrepreneur, you have to be happy. Like you don't have to make yourself miserable or suffer, or like martyr yourself to work with people that you can't stand working with. So, and I've also learned that the hard way, where it's like, I'm getting really frustrated because I feel like I have to keep re-articulating this 9 different ways. And this person just seems to keep going rogue and doing whatever they want. And well, maybe I didn't make myself clear. Maybe I'll just need to make myself a little more clear next time. And it's like, okay, I can keep trying to change and mold myself to the situation. But after a while, like, how drained am I? And maybe this person is just not a fit for my team. And like, we just have to be honest with ourselves about that. So I think, it's like, it could be as simple as we were talking about the time study thing, literally like a plus or a minus after you do each thing. Are you energized or drained? Every single time when you interact with this person, if you're drained, this just might not be a fit. It doesn't mean they're bad or they're wrong, or even that they hate you or they're mean, but it's like, I am drained consistently by these interactions. Like, this isn't working. It's not working for me.
No, that's brilliant. I mean, I totally resonate and promote on the concept where you're saying, like, in the end, it's your business. So grab the reins and do whatever you want. But the energized or drained plus minus, like, what a powerful, because this happens a lot in entrepreneurship. Someone is on paper great. They do a good job. They show up. They even believe in what you're doing. But like, if they're draining to the team, there's some cost in that how would you measure it, sort of thing.
Exactly.
And especially you at the helm, like, it's so important that you don't have a lot of things draining you. So
exactly. It's that idea of emotional expense. Like, if you're spending time
emotional expense, that's the right one.
Yeah, this woman, Cy Wakeman, she's an HR guru that I'm just obsessed with. And she has like an actual scoring system where you can rate how emotionally expensive you are, which is a very fascinating exercise, as well as the other people on your team. And someone might be quote unquote a rock star. We've all had them. If you own a studio, the rock star teacher, all the students love them, but they are a huge pain in the ass consistently, really hard to deal with, not a great team player. Have you, overstepping your own boundaries, or like eroding your boundaries and not holding the integrity of like the rules because, well, I'll make an exception for them. Like, that doesn't work. That's not fair for everybody else on the team. And it's just not workable, no matter how popular they might be.
Looking that person up immediately following this. Emotional expense.
Awesome.
Yeah, so good. So this is it's sort of like, as we come towards the end of time here, I've got like 3 final-ish questions. But what this whole conversation that we're in right now makes me think of, when you're building an empire like yours, and it's going to continue growing, I want to hear about that. could you share with us an obstacle? Like if you had to, if looking back now in the entrepreneurial building your empire thing standpoint, what was like the obstacle, the big one that either personally or in business you really had to overcome to be able to get to where you are? And not to keep ranting or anything, but the reason I ask this is I feel like entrepreneurial vision is something I find fascinating, because if you ask someone opening a single location brick and mortar boutique fitness studio, the vision is get opened and teach some classes and make enough money to eat and be happy, and I'll just teach them all. And like, that's the end of the vision. Then once you're operating, you're like, okay, well now I'm doing that, now what? And like, you need this other bigger vision part. So the vision itself is the obstacle in that case, but this journey of more growth, I think there are these surprise obstacles that come up. So now looking back for you, like, was there a major obstacle that you really had to overcome or that surprised you?
First of all, like, I'm just trying to receive all of the, like, I'm trying to receive the high praise that you're giving me. And you just keep like saying it like so factually that I'm just so successful and that I have this empire and everything. And again, this is why words are so important. Like, you're creating this awesome reality. I could sit here and be like, oh, I haven't done anything. This is nothing. Like, you know what I mean? Like, there's that knee-jerk response to be like, oh, but it's not enough and whatever. So I just want to acknowledge that, like, I'm absorbing and receiving that, because believe me, there were many times in the last 2.5 years where I did not feel like a successful business owner. Like, I just felt like the opposite of that. So thank you. It's all in the perception and it's all in really the mindset. So thank you. And I just want to, name that. And so biggest lessons that were probably the most fundamental or big surprises or things I had to learn. I would say, number one, when you scale past a couple of locations, when you start to have a lot bigger team and you are not able to physically manage everything and everyone yourself, where there are now other layers between you, and, you know, things wouldn't work if you had to do all the managing, if you had to, whatever, like, if it weren't for the systems and the processes and all the other people, if everyone quit tomorrow, like, we would just not be open. Like, it would be impossible. I couldn't just show up and teach all the classes myself now. There's too many things. I didn't know that my job was going to shift to being about organizational leadership. And I didn't know how to lead teams of people, you know, like, I didn't even really know I knew how to manage a few people in like a small team when I was able to like have a personal relationship with everybody. I didn't know how to scale that. I didn't know how to maintain a good relationship and a good rapport with everyone working on my team, even if I don't physically see them or work with them. And I didn't know how to make sure that the culture is right in all the locations, even if I'm not the one physically running it. Like, I just didn't know how much of my time would be spent on like during the pandemic, crisis communications. That was all I did. That was all I did, was manage crisis day in and day out. And there was no way to make every single person happy. Somebody was pissed off all the time, and, you know, trying to keep people upbeat and excited and still believing in the vision, even when I didn't even know what the vision was anymore sometimes, because I was just trying to have us survive. And I didn't even know what the future of boutique studios would even be. So I think that level of leadership I learned on the job. I don't know if there's any other way to do, but I definitely didn't realize that's what I was signing up for. So that has been a real growing up process for sure. And then the other thing that came up right away when you asked the question is just firing your friends sucks. When you hire your friends, eventually as your business grows, sometimes you have to fire your friends. And I've definitely waited longer than I should have, either because the person wasn't working out in the role and or things kind of soured and nobody was willing to admit it, or the business had grown to a place where they just weren't someone you would hire today to do that role. Or because for budgetary reasons, like there was just, you couldn't afford to keep them on. And yet, I'm holding on to a position that is not anymore to the benefit of the business because financially we can't sustain it. So I think like just having the courage to have those tough conversations and make those really hard decisions, that has just been such a growth opportunity for sure.
To back us up, I really relate to that, especially, in coaching. It's very common that we have someone who they started the business themselves, then they hired like one or two people who then either they were friends with or they become very close with because it's just them. It's this nice little tight knit unit.
Yes.
But then as you grow beyond that, something changes and they're maybe no longer a fit, at least in the same role that they're in or whatever. And I think there's this desire for us to bring our tribe with us sort of thing, which is a good desire, but that's just not always the right thing to do in the situation. So I relate to that for sure. That going back though, is there a simple sort of practical thing that you've learned that you could share for managing a team when, to your point, like you can't be in direct personal communication with all of them all the time. And in fact, probably don't want to be, and, to be able to still effectively instill the culture of the brand and make sure everyone's happy and, make sure things work how they're supposed to be for the overall benefit. Because I think that's a really hard transition. Is there something that you have discovered or that you guys use more practically around that?
I think that one thing I learned, the very first lesson I ever learned in the pandemic, like the weekend that, the world shut down, was communicate often and before you have all the right answers. Like we were waiting till Monday to like have a meeting and then send out an announcement about what we were going to do and when we were going to close and whatever. But we didn't say, hey, everyone, we know the news is breaking. We're going to meet on Monday. Like we didn't say anything. We didn't make an announcement. And the flurry of concerned emails from staff all throughout that weekend it just ended up being more messy than it had to be. If I would have just reached out like on Friday and been like, hey, quick announcement, I know stuff is happening. So that was a big lesson, just communicating. And I think that honestly, as much work as you have to do and as much as you don't think you have time, I think you have to really make it part of your job to have an executive communications plan, whether that's, I try to go in and do a continuing ed once a quarter where I'm physically showing up and interacting. And so I just think whatever, one of the people in a mastermind that I'm in, she does these 90-second updates once a week. And she's the CEO of the company and the owner. I think that's really cool. Just like, obviously don't overdo it where you're not going to have time to sustain it, but finding a way. Done is better than perfect, I guess, when it comes to communicating with your team.
I love this. Communicate often and before you have all the answers. I think it's such a good recommendation. And that's really for any level of business. One thing I can share is when the pandemic hit, I was in San Luis Obispo teaching at MindBody. But I kind of didn't, it was such a left field thing. Like I knew it was going to get weird, but I didn't realize how intense it was going to be, how quickly. Yeah. So I literally flew back and then went on a boat here offshore for 3 days. And that was that weekend you're talking about. Like we had no cell service, no one radioed in. Like we came back and everyone's phones blew up. It was like we were coming back to a zombie apocalypse. Like, wow. And I had such an enormous onslaught of pissed off people that Monday because I was not reachable over the weekend while this was going down. when shit hit the fan. And it was like, it didn't actually change anything I said, right? But just what you're saying, like, because I didn't have the opportunity to communicate about like, this is crazy, we're going to talk about this on Monday, that alone, could have really gone a long way. So
yeah, then it
yeah.
feels like you're playing defense when people are already pissed off that they haven't heard from you and stuff. And you're just showing up in a different way and trying not to be rattled by like, oh, everyone's pissed off. And, it's just very uncomfortable. It makes it harder than it has to be, I think.
Yeah. Okay. So final major thing for today. I know that you get asked this question, and I'm not just sure, I know for sure a fact that you get asked this question all the time about like, where are you going next? What's the future for Bar and Soul? What's the big whatever? But pertaining to the book, which again, if you guys haven't heard of it or haven't gotten Own It All yet, you have to go and get this book because it's amazing. I can't have enough good things to say about it. And I think it doesn't even matter if you're a boutique fitness owner or not. There's so much value in here about how to just approach your life as someone who is also maybe any level of entrepreneur. Definitely highly recommend. One of the last chapters in here is about legacy. So from that angle, I want to reword the question. Where are you going? Where is Bar and Soul going when we're talking about legacy? And what even does legacy look like from where you are right now? Is there a master plan there? Are you inventing it as you go? What's up? Give us the goods.
Thank you. What a great question. Okay, so I do not have a crystal clear roadmap right now for the next couple of years based on what the last couple of years were like. I just know what's really important to me right now. And I know that it feels so good to be back in momentum with the physical studios, and which I really finally feel like, because this area in New England was really, really hit hard. So, this Black Friday was like, there was just a lot of rejoicing. So we're like, wow, wait a minute, this is starting to look like familiar again, the way, we remember things being. So I am enjoying and really savoring the studios that I have right now and that have survived like to hell and back. So I'm just really like trying to spend more time in the studios and just be so excited about even doing granular things like pulling reports and just getting really excited and celebrating the growth every single month, and just being so grateful to have a business that can support me and my family again, when it was up for debate for a little while there. And so I think just really appreciating and celebrating is the phase that I'm in. As far as growth, I don't know that I will ever open another brick and mortar studio. Like that definitely took a few years off of my life. Going through that with 5 studios through the pandemic, like I just don't know if I have the stomach for another one anytime soon. I reserve the right to change my mind, but I'm so in love with our online business. I love our bar teacher training, Bar and Soul Academy, which is all online. We have a yoga teacher training, 200 hours, also through Bar and Soul Academy, that we've just taken online. It's always been in person before now. So I love being able to reach people around the world with our teacher training programs. We are getting ready to roll out licensing for the Bar and Soul method so that other folks can use the Bar and Soul name on their classes. That's something that we haven't even announced yet. So, but that is coming and it's in the works. Yeah. So that's really exciting. And for me personally, what I'm really very excited about is just how can I add more soul to the experience? Is it adding coaching programs, more personal development workshops, temple ceremonies? Like, I just want every day to be so excited about the opportunities for deeper personal growth that we're creating. So, I mean, people come to us for a great workout and we do provide them with that. And I just want to see like, how deep can we go on the soul part? And yeah, that's just like what I'm really fired up about right now.
That's a good legacy. How deep can we go on the soul part? It's a good question to add. There's the question-based mission statement right there. I love it. This has been awesome. Clearly, Andrea, we could be talking all day long about this stuff, but we should probably go do some other things too. For those who've stuck through and are watching here, other than going and grabbing the book Own It All, how can they support you? How can they check out what you're doing? How can they participate in Bar and Soul? Where should they go?
Okay, so you can follow me on Instagram and Andrea Isabelle Lucas. You can check out our certification programs if you're interested in our bar teacher training. It's Bar Soul Academy. The studios are Bar Soul, and we do have on like all the social platforms, and we do have a live stream virtual studio as well. So you can take class with us from anywhere. We're streaming straight from the studios. And so depending how you want to interact, I do business coaching, I do public speaking. So if you're interested in those avenues, definitely connect with me over on Instagram, send me a DM, and I would love to connect over there.
Easy on all the platforms. Wait, I have to ask this question. Are you on TikTok?
I have a TikTok account.
I'm just starting to ask this question. I'm trying to confirm that I'm not the only one who is obsessed with TikTok that's in our world, but I think.
So yeah, have a TikTok account, not there yet. I'm actually really trying to focus on, when I create content, doing it for my email list and then syndicating it to the social channels instead of going out of my way to like create content for social.
Oh, dang, there's a whole nother million questions come up.
Next episode.
That's such a good next episode. We're talking email marketing instead of social media, then email. I love it. All right. Well, thank you so much, my friends. I really appreciate you coming on. And that's it for now. For those of you, go grab the book, Own It All, follow Andrea on social media, check out a Bar and Soul class. Even if you're not in a place where she has brick and mortar, obviously you can do an online, and stay tuned, because as we just heard, opportunity if you are looking for your own version of a business like Andrea's, being able to license out and have some of that proven programming there for you, I think is really good opportunity. Thank you so much, Andrea, and that's it for now.
Thank you so much. This has been awesome. I'd like to hire you as my hype man going forward, if that's all right.
The hype man, yeah.
Yeah.
I definitely, well, Michelle has to approve that because she controls the schedule. So
that's right.
Yeah, I think it could happen. All right, you guys, it's been another great episode of Amplify Your Impact, and stay tuned for our next one. We'll talk to you soon. Peace.
Bye.
Thank you.